The night was quiet, but silence never meant peace. Eleanor carried the weight of truth like shards pressed against her chest. The letter shook in her trembling hands as her eyes traced the cruel words again. She whispered, "How could he hide this from me?" Her voice cracked like brittle glass. The shadows on the walls mocked her fragile stance. Each breath became a storm inside her ribs, and the floor beneath felt foreign, unsafe. The house, once warm, now echoed with betrayal. She staggered back, clutching her heart, as if silence itself had claws that refused to let go. The air felt colder, heavier, refusing her solace. Eleanor closed her eyes, tears carving paths down her cheeks. The truth had broken her in a single strike. Morning arrived, but Eleanor found no comfort in the light. The sun streamed through curtains, but it felt harsh against her pale skin. She moved like a ghost, her steps soft, as if afraid to disturb the silence. The letter lay on the floor still, untouched, its words etched into her mind. She whispered, "I can't unsee it." The house groaned with the weight of secrets she had carried unknowingly. Dust particles swirled in the morning beams, but nothing felt alive. The warmth of the home she once cherished was stripped bare. Eleanor lingered in the kitchen doorway, gripping the frame, her lips pressed tight as though silence was safer than truth. Eleanor sat at the dining table, her fingers tracing circles on the wood. Her mind replayed every moment with Daniel, searching for signs she had missed. Was it all a lie? She murmured, her voice hollow. The house seemed to respond with silence, each creak of wood reminding her she was alone. The smell of last night's wine lingered, sour and bitter. She pressed her forehead against the table, closing her eyes tightly, trying to shut out the truth. But memory was relentless, dragging her deeper into despair. She whispered, "He knew." And he chose silence. The phone vibrated on the table, but Eleanor couldn't bring herself to answer. She stared at it as though it carried 1,000 knives. Her confidant Claire had called 3 times already. "Not now," Eleanor whispered, curling further into herself. The sound of the phone echoed in her skull, reminding her of a world beyond her grief. She knew Claire's voice could break her walls, but she wasn't ready. Not yet. She pressed her palms over her ears, as if silence could shield her. "If I speak," she thought, "the truth will consume me." That night, Eleanor stood before the bathroom mirror, her reflection unrecognizable. Her eyes were swollen, her lips pale, her spirit fractured. She touched the glass with trembling fingers, as though seeking to reach the version of herself before the truth. "Who am I now?" she whispered. Her voice cracked, but no answer came. The silence wrapped tighter, reminding her of its power. The bathroom's cold tiles grounded her, yet made her feel trapped. She knew she couldn't hide forever. The weight of what she carried would demand release. But tonight, she chose silence again. The rain returned that night, tapping against the windows like memories demanding entry. Eleanor sat cross-legged on the floor, the letter beside her like an open wound. She whispered, "He lied to protect himself, not me." The words felt sour on her tongue. Her mind spiraled back to the day she first trusted Daniel, his smile lighting up her fragile world. That memory now burned like betrayal, reminding her of what she had lost. She pressed her palms against her temples, as though she could crush the truth out of her head. The house no longer felt hers. It belonged to his silence, to his secrets, to the betrayal that refused to release her soul. Morning brought no peace. Eleanor wandered into the garden, her bare feet sinking into the damp grass. She clutched her sweater tightly as cold air brushed her skin. Her eyes lifted toward the gray sky, heavy with clouds. She whispered, "Why didn't I see it sooner?" The garden, once full of laughter, felt hollow now. The roses Daniel planted looked wilted, their petals bruised by the storm. Eleanor's voice trembled as she said, "Everything was rooted in lies." Her words drifted with the wind, absorbed by silence. The truth had stained even the earth beneath her feet. That afternoon, Eleanor's old friend Claire appeared at the door, her expression lined with concern. "You didn't answer my calls," Claire said softly. Eleanor forced a smile, though her eyes betrayed her. She replied, "I couldn't. Not yet." Claire reached out, touching Eleanor's arm gently, grounding her. The warmth of that gesture nearly broke Eleanor. Her silence was a cage, yet Claire's presence was a key she feared to use. She wanted to collapse into her friend's arms, but shame chained her. Instead, she said, "I'll tell you soon." The lie cut sharper than truth. Later, Eleanor wandered through Daniel's study, her fingers grazing the spines of books lined in neat rows. Dust clung to the shelves, proof of his absence. On the desk, she found another envelope sealed and untouched. Her stomach tightened. She whispered, "Another secret." Her fingers hesitated, trembling over the flap. Opening it might shatter her further, yet leaving it closed would chain her to questions. She leaned against the desk, heart racing, breath shallow. The room smelled faintly of his cologne, haunting her with memories. "How much did you hide from me?" she murmured, voice barely audible. That night, Eleanor sat on the edge of her bed, the unopened envelope clutched tightly. The house seemed to breathe with her, each creak echoing her dread. She whispered, "If I open it, I'll never go back." Her eyes fixed on the door, as though Daniel's shadow lingered there. Silence pressed against her chest, louder than any scream. Tears welled again, but she let them fall without resistance. She pulled the blanket over her lap, curling inward, as though shielding herself from a world that had betrayed her. The envelope slipped from her hands, landing on the floor like a verdict waiting to be read. Eleanor sat in the kitchen, the unopened envelope glaring at her from the counter. Her chest felt heavy, as though silence had grown teeth. She whispered, "If I open it, I end the life I thought I had." Her hands trembled as she reached for the envelope, but pulled away at the last moment. The weight of choice pinned her down, suffocating her breath. Her coffee grew cold, untouched, as the ticking clock mocked her hesitation. She thought of Daniel's voice, the way it once made her feel safe. Now, even memory betrayed her, cutting her open. The doorbell startled her, pulling her from her storm. It was Claire again, persistent and unwilling to give up. "Eleanor, please let me in," she called, her voice gentle. Eleanor froze, her hand hovering over the doorknob. Shame burned her cheeks. She whispered to herself, "If I let her in, she'll see me broken." Claire's knock echoed, steady as a heartbeat, demanding connection. Eleanor's silence stretched, but her body ached for comfort. Finally she cracked the door, her voice low as she said, "I can't promise I'll speak." Claire sat across from Eleanor in the living room, her hands folded patiently. "You don't have to say everything now," Claire said softly. Eleanor avoided her gaze, tracing patterns on the sofa fabric. Her lips parted, but words failed. She whispered, "He lied, Claire. Everything I believed was fragile." Claire leaned closer, eyes heavy with empathy. "You don't need to carry this alone." Eleanor's tears came silently, her body trembling. She longed to surrender to comfort, but feared the collapse. Silence pressed between them, heavy yet tender with understanding. That evening, Eleanor found herself standing by the old oak tree in the backyard, the place where Daniel once promised her forever. She whispered, "Forever was a lie." The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of damp earth. She pressed her palm against the tree's rough bark, grounding herself against the flood of memory. She could almost hear his laughter, see the way his eyes once softened, but those memories now felt poisoned. Her voice cracked as she said, "You destroyed the only safe place I had." The tree, silent and ancient, bore witness to her unraveling. Later that night, Eleanor sat with Claire again, the envelope between them on the coffee table. Claire reached out, voice steady. "You don't need to do this alone." Eleanor stared at the envelope, the paper glowing under the lamp. "If I open it," she whispered, "the last illusion dies." Claire touched her hand gently. "Illusions are prisons, Eleanor. Truth sets you free, even if it breaks you first." Eleanor's breath caught. The silence in the room thickened, but this time it felt less like a cage and more like a choice waiting to be made. The storm outside mirrored Eleanor's storm within. She sat on the floor of the study, the unopened envelope before her, trembling with dread. Her heart pounded as though it wished to escape her chest. She whispered, "Do I really want to know?" Her voice cracked against the thunder's roar. Memories of Daniel's promises clashed with the venom of betrayal. She slammed her fist onto the wooden floor, pain flashing through her hand. "You took everything," she cried into the silence. Her tears mixed with rage, her breath sharp and uneven. The truth waited, merciless, sealed in paper. Later that evening, Eleanor confronted Claire in the kitchen, her voice rising with unrestrained anger. "He lied to me, Claire, and I believed every word." Claire reached out, but Eleanor pulled back, her face streaked with tears. "Don't tell me it will be okay," Eleanor snapped, her tone sharp as broken glass. Claire's eyes softened, holding her pain quietly. "I won't," she whispered, "but I'll stay." Eleanor turned away, gripping the counter with white knuckles. Rage pulsed through her veins, but beneath it lay a fear deeper than words, a fear of facing herself. The following morning, Eleanor visited the old church on the hill, seeking answers in the silence of sacred walls. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, painting colors across her face. She whispered, "If there's meaning in this pain, show me." Her voice trembled, echoing in the emptiness. She knelt, pressing her hands together tightly. The weight of her past pressed heavy on her shoulders, yet something fragile stirred within her, a spark not yet extinguished. She closed her eyes, the silence filling her like both curse and balm. That afternoon, Eleanor confronted Daniel's brother, Mark, who had come unannounced. His voice was firm. "You deserve the truth, Eleanor, but it may break you." She glared, anger bubbling over. "Break me? I'm already shattered." Mark, 36, shifted uneasily, guilt etched into his face. "Daniel wasn't the man you thought he was," he admitted, his words hanging heavy in the room. Eleanor's breath caught, her nails digging into her palms. "Then tell me everything," she demanded, her voice sharp, trembling with desperation. That night, Eleanor sat alone in her bedroom, staring at the envelope once more. Her hands hovered above it, then fell away again. "Not tonight," she whispered, her voice drained of strength. The walls felt closer, the silence unbearable. She crawled into bed, curling beneath the blanket like a child seeking safety. Her tears stained the pillow as she whispered, "Tomorrow, maybe tomorrow." She closed her eyes, but her mind refused to rest. The storm outside had passed, but inside, it still raged, relentless and cruel. Eleanor finally tore open the envelope, her breath ragged as the seal gave way. Inside was a letter in Daniel's handwriting, but the words struck her like knives. "I never wanted you to know," it read, confessing a child from a past affair. Eleanor's hands shook violently, the ink blurring as tears fell. Her chest caved in, her voice breaking into a whisper. "Why would you bury me under your lies?" The world tilted, the room spinning as betrayal grew heavier than grief. She clutched the paper to her chest, her body folding in on itself, her soul screaming in silence. Claire found Eleanor in the living room, crumpled on the sofa, the letter discarded beside her. "Eleanor," she whispered, kneeling. Eleanor's voice cracked. "He had a child. All this time." Claire's eyes widened, but she steadied her tone. "This truth doesn't erase your worth." Eleanor shook her head violently, her hair falling forward. "It erases everything I thought I knew." Claire pulled her close, letting Eleanor's tears stain her shoulder. Silence filled the room, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like a shared wound. Later that night, Eleanor confronted Mark, her voice sharp with fury. "You knew, didn't you?" Mark froze, guilt written across his face. "Yes," he admitted quietly, "but it wasn't mine to tell." Eleanor's voice rose like a storm. "You let me live in his lies." Mark's jaw tightened, his own pain leaking through. "He wanted to protect you," he said, but the words only cut deeper. Eleanor's fists clenched, her body trembling with rage. "Protect me? He destroyed me." Her voice broke, leaving only raw silence between them. Exhausted, Eleanor collapsed into the garden under the moonlight, her body sinking into the cold grass. She whispered to the stars, "What am I supposed to do with this pain?" The night air chilled her, yet she welcomed the sting. It felt real when nothing else did. She thought of the child Daniel had hidden, a life that would forever haunt her. Tears slid silently as her voice broke. Was I never enough? The wind rustled through the roses, their petals trembling as though answering her grief. Claire found her there, under the shadow of the oak tree. She knelt beside Eleanor, whispering, "You're still here, and that means something." Eleanor's eyes glistened as she shook her head. "I'm broken, Claire. Nothing left." Claire pressed her hand firmly into Eleanor's, her voice steady. "Broken pieces can still build something new." Eleanor wept, not from despair alone, but from the fragile spark of hope ignited by those words. For the first time, the silence between them carried the weight of possibility, not destruction. Eleanor stood before the mirror again, her reflection broken yet unyielding. "This silence will kill me," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Her fingers traced the edges of the glass, trembling but steadying with each breath. Memories of Daniel's betrayal surged, but she felt something different, resolve. "I cannot stay trapped in his lies," she murmured, her tone raw. For the first time, her eyes did not look away from her reflection. They were swollen, weary, but fierce. Silence no longer seemed protective. It felt suffocating, and she was ready to break free. Eleanor met Claire in the kitchen, her voice steadier than before. "I need to face this," she said. Claire's eyes softened with pride. "Then I'll stand beside you," she promised. Eleanor's hands shook as she poured water, the glass clinking against the counter. "No," she whispered, lifting her chin. "This part I must face alone." Claire reached out, her hand resting briefly on Eleanor's arm. "Then know I'm here when you fall," she said softly. Eleanor inhaled deeply, her chest rising with something new, courage burning beneath the scars. The study became her battlefield. Eleanor placed the letter and envelope on the desk, her breath shallow but unwavering. "This ends tonight," she whispered. The lamp's glow painted her features sharp, every tear streak turned into armor. She unfolded the confession once more, her hands no longer trembling. "Your lies cannot define me," she said aloud, as though Daniel were listening from the grave. Her voice cracked but did not falter. The silence that followed was not suffocating, it was hers. For the first time, she reclaimed her breath from the weight of betrayal. Mark arrived unannounced once again, but this time Eleanor did not shrink back. She faced him squarely, her tone firm. "No more half-truths. Tell me everything." Mark hesitated, guilt tightening his features. "Daniel was afraid of losing you," he confessed. Eleanor's eyes blazed. "He lost me the moment he lied." The words cut like steel, sharper than her tears had ever been. Mark lowered his head, silent. Eleanor's body shook, but not from weakness, from strength long buried now rising like fire. That night, Eleanor walked into the garden, the oak tree towering above her. She placed the letter at its roots, letting the paper absorb the damp earth. "You don't own me anymore," she whispered into the night. Her voice broke, but carried strength. The wind stirred the branches as though answering her defiance. Eleanor tilted her face upward, tears glistening, and for the first time they felt cleansing, not corrosive. Her silence cracked open, releasing the scream she had swallowed for too long. It echoed into the night, raw, heartbreaking, but freeing. Morning broke with fragile light, slipping through the curtains of Eleanor's room. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, eyes swollen but calm. "The truth is mine now," she whispered, her voice steady, though laced with sorrow. The silence did not press as it once had. It lay gently around her, like a blanket that had lost its suffocating weight. She thought of Daniel's lies, of the letter buried beneath the oak tree, and for the first time she felt untethered. Pain remained, but it no longer chained her. Eleanor walked into the kitchen where Claire was waiting, coffee mugs steaming on the counter. Claire's eyes searched her friend's face, seeing something new, resolve. Eleanor spoke softly, I'm not healed, but I've begun. Claire nodded, her lips trembling into a faint smile. That's enough, she replied. They sipped in silence, but the silence no longer carried despair. It carried understanding. Eleanor met her friend's eyes, tears glistening. Thank you for staying when I couldn't speak, she whispered. Claire's hand reached across the table, anchoring Eleanor in the fragile beauty of survival. Later that day, Eleanor returned to the oak tree. She placed her hand on its rough bark, feeling the strength rooted in the earth. You've seen all my breaking, she murmured, but you'll also see me stand. The wind stirred, rustling the branches as though answering. Her eyes lifted to the sky, her breath slow and steady. She carried the memory of betrayal, but now it no longer hollowed her, it sharpened her. Her silence had been a prison. But here, beneath this ancient witness, it became a vow to rise. As evening fell, Eleanor sat at her desk with a blank sheet of paper before her. She picked up a pen, her hand trembling but eager. I will not end in silence, she whispered. Words began to flow, raw and jagged, spilling truths she had swallowed for too long. Each line carried fragments of pain, but also fragments of hope. The page filled slowly, her breathing steadying with every stroke. She paused, staring at what she had written, and for the first time in days her lips curled into the faintest fragile smile. Night settled, and Eleanor stood by the window, gazing out at the quiet street. The house was still, no longer hostile but hushed with peace. She whispered, "The aftermath is mine to shape." Her reflection stared back, fragile yet alive. Silence wrapped her again, but this time it was not suffocating, it was hers, claimed and transformed. A tear slid down her cheek, not of despair but of release. She placed her palm against the glass, and for the first time since the truth unraveled, she exhaled deeply, unshackled.